Meanwhile, the battle between the US and Russia is intensifying. The CIA has announced a mass recruitment drive. They're looking for Russian spies. And where do they hope to find them? On a Telegram channel. Not making this up. You have to look at this video. It was created by the CIA.
Это та жизнь, о которой я мечтал. Тот путь, который я себе выбрал. Почему жизни одних людей ценятся больше, чем жизни других?
This video shows fictional Russian officials at home and at work. They're struggling over a question. Should they reach out to American spies? That's the question they're debating. There is no mention of Putin or the war in Ukraine. The video ends with a message. The people around you may not want to hear the truth. We do. You aren't powerless. Connect with us securely. In the last frame of the video, there are instructions on how Russians can contact the CIA securely. Guess what the response is? Apparently, some Russians have reached out and Moscow isn't pleased about this. The Kremlin says it's watching what's going on.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. But I'm convinced that our special services are also monitoring this space in the necessary way. Given that, and we all know perfectly well that the CIA and other Western intelligence services are not reducing their activity on the territory of our country.
An open offer to spy for America straight from the CIA. Why just Russia? No country would be happy about this. But then again, this is not your average diplomatic relationship. The United States and Russia are sworn enemies. And espionage has defined this relationship, especially in the Soviet era. So these recruitment efforts are not new, really, though the methods may be. The US has been at it for a while, more so after the war in Ukraine began. They see Russia as a quote-unquote potentially rich recruitment environment. And they have clear targets, like Russian government officials and those Russians who recently fled the country. Do you know how many people we are talking about here? Some 500,000. 5 lakh people. That's how many Russians are said to have fled the country. They left in the wake of the war, and the CIA sees them as a good resource pool. They can talk without the fear of being tracked. Or so the Americans hope. In November, a senior CIA official defined the perfect candidate. Let me quote that for you. We're looking around the world for Russians who are as disgusted with that as we are, because we're open for business. It couldn't have been clearer. What do you think Russia is doing in response? It's going after Americans and branding them as spies. This week, an American was charged in Vladivostok. His name is Robert Shonov. He used to work for a US consulate in Russia. Now he's been detained and charged with espionage. He was detained in Vladivostok and he's being kept in a jail in Moscow. The US embassy in Moscow has not said anything about the arrest yet. This isn't the first such, though. Earlier, a journalist was held. His name is Gershkovich. He works for the Wall Street Journal. He too has been accused of espionage. And the White House has called these charges ridiculous.
These espionage charges are ridiculous. The targeting of American citizens by Russian government is unacceptable. We condemn the detention of Mr. Gershkovich in the strongest terms.
But they should expect more of this. Since the Soviet era, both Washington and Moscow have engaged in the shadow war. Espionage is critical to their operations, a way to gain leverage. Let me in fact tell you about the most famous incident of this kind, the Great Seal bug. This was some 60 years back. American officials appeared before the UN Security Council. They presented proof of Soviet spying. And what was this proof? The Americans had found a bug. A device that listened into their conversations. It captured conversations and transmitted sound waves to an external receiver. Do you know where the bug was found? Inside a gift. A gift given by the Soviets to the Americans. The bug was plated inside a wooden carving. This was hung at the ambassador's home, inside his home office for several years. No one knows for sure how much information was compromised. But it's believed that the Soviets got access to a great deal of privileged information. They used to keep a car outside the ambassador's home just to listen to what was being discussed inside. The same thing is happening now, only this time the weapon is far more sophisticated.